On today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the Stihl 026 chainsaw and seeing why the oiler system isn't working. The first thing that I do when a chainsaw comes in the shop and it's not oiling is check the oil reservoir. Make sure that there's plenty of oil in the reservoir so that way you can at least eliminate that problem. The second thing I'm going to check when a saw comes in the shop not oiling are these oil ports on the bar. If these oil ports become plugged, you cannot transfer oil from your chainsaw to the bar through the hole into the bar rail. If it's plugged, it's going to stop the flow of oil. If you take a look at this hole right there, it is completely plugged. This could be an issue with the saw. First thing I'm going to do is blow everything out, put the bar and chain back on the saw and run it to see if that takes care of it. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, we're going to go to step 3. The next thing we're going to check is the worm gear spring. So all worm gears are going to have a spring on them, and that tip right there is going to fit into your sprocket. The sprocket takes this and rotates it around, which in turn turns the oil pump. So if this is broke off or worn down, it will keep your saw from oiling. If that doesn't work, the next thing we're going to check is the worm gear itself. The plastic has threading on it, which feeds into the oil pump. If that threading is messed up or worn down, it is not going to rotate the oil pump, which in turn, you're not going to have oil to your bar. And the very last thing that I'm going to check is going to be the oil pump. If we get through all of those steps and it's still not working, chances are the threading on the oil pump's bad. After you take your oil pump off, go ahead and blow some air through the oiler line just in case there's a chance some debris got in there. But 99.9% of the time, by the time you get down to the oil pump, it is going to need to have a new oil pump in order to function. Just to recap, bar oil reservoir, oiler port on bar, worm gear spring, worm gear itself, oil pump, oil line. One other thing you can check would be the oil filter, but 99.9% of the time it is not the oil filter unless you had some significant case of dumping a whole bunch of debris inside the oil tank.
Here's a look at the worm gear that I removed from this saw. Notice how the threading is destroyed, and that is why it's not oiling properly.
Let's jump right into the video and I'll show you guys how it's done.
In order to remove the clutch, we have to block off the top of the piston, so we got to take the spark plug off. That's why I'm taking this cover off. Notice the air filter is dirty. I'm going to clean that off as well. Remove the spark plug, and then we're going to use a plastic piston stop. You can also use a piece of rope as well. Here's the piston stops that I use from Stihl. You just slide that into place, make sure your piston's in the down position, and then rotate the clutch or the recoil, and then push the piston up so that way it's locking into place. Take off the E-clip and the washer that holds on the sprocket. Normally the sprocket pulls right out, except this one's being difficult. Apparently the customer heated up their clutch and melted on the needle cage to the shaft. I'm going to have to try to pry it loose. It's bound on there pretty good. Doesn't want to move. I'm going to cut some of the excess melted plastic off. Obviously we're going to have to replace this needle cage, but right now I'm trying to get it off without doing any damage to the crankshaft. This was one of the worst ones I've ever seen. It did take me about 15 minutes to get this off, and I got it off just by using gravity and grabbing a hold of the sprocket and shaking it, and eventually it worked its way out. I did put some penetrating oil on the crankshaft, but that didn't really do anything. And this is what it looks like once you get it off. This one's pretty dirty, so I'm going to scrape all that crap out of there before I put it back on. But notice the needle cage, the top part is actually melted, so I got to push it through the bottom to get it off. And there it is. We're going to throw this away and put a new one on. To remove the clutch, you're going to use a 19mm socket. Make sure you're going clockwise. I'm adjusting the piston stop right here to bring the piston all the way up to the top of the cylinder so that way I don't puncture a hole in the top of the piston. If you do have slop in there, you can actually puncture it by cranking on there with an impact. So just be careful when you're doing this. Notice how I'm holding the piston stop at the same time I'm using the impact. That way your piston stop doesn't fly out. Now I'm going to remove the worm gear spring so I can get to the worm gear. And the tip of the spring does look good. The threading on this worm gear is heavily damaged, so that is a culprit. The gears on the oil pump are metal, so when you got metal against plastic, metal is going to win. Now I'm going to reinstall a new worm gear and a worm gear spring after I've cleaned out the oil pump. This cover plate says top. Top is always going to face you. Counterclockwise the clutch to tighten it on. Now I'm going to scrape all the debris out of the sprocket before I put it back on the machine. Notice a hole in the sprocket. It's going to fit right there on the worm gear spring. If you don't have this aligned, it's not going to go back on properly. I use a flashlight, it's easier. I greased the needle cage and put it back on. This is comparing side to side. The old one was thrown away. We got this new one right here. Just throw a little grease around it and then slide it back into place. It's going to be a tight fit with the grease, so we're going to have to give it a little help to get it back in. Use a socket to push this in, not a screwdriver. These needle cages are delicate and they're just plastic with some really thin metal, so the socket's going to work it back into place without damaging anything. Don't forget to install the rim sprocket before you put the washer and the E-clip back on. I just use needle nose pliers. I put one in the crankshaft, one in the back of the E-clip, and I pull them together. And notice I cleaned the air filter for the customer and put it back on.
This particular repair normally takes about 15-20 minutes. In this video, you can see the needle cage I was struggling with. It actually got melted and jammed onto the crankshaft. So it took me a good 20 minutes to be able to get that sprocket off and get down to the clutch to do the repair. So unfortunately, I spent more time tearing everything down than I did replacing the parts, but that's just the nature of the beast, and sometimes this stuff happens. Once we got everything cleaned out, got the worm gear replaced, everything put back together, the oiler system worked perfect. On both steel and Husqvarna saws, you are going to have to take the clutch off in order to access the oil pump. Sometimes that can be a little bit tricky depending on how seized it is to the crankshaft. Just remember, righty-loosey on taking those clutches off. If you guys found this video helpful, make sure you guys drop a like down below and subscribe to my channel. I got lots of other great content on there of tools, tips, and tricks that I use on a daily basis to get customers' equipment fixed and back in the field. I also got new product reviews of products that are coming out by Steel, Husqvarna, a lot of other major companies. Make sure you guys check out the description. I'm going to list some of my tools down below that I use to do these repairs. It will help you guys with your projects, save you a lot of time and some money along the way. So again, thank you guys for tuning into the channel. I really appreciate it, and make sure you guys have an awesome rest of your day.